Probably. I probably should set up the microphone before I start to go live, but you know. We're going to see if anyone joins us. Hello. Hello. In it. Oh, look at how fancy this is. Coils of hair. Anyway, sorry. Hello, you old buggers. How are you doing? I don't have a I don't have a very clear plan on what to discuss today. I have one new pen to show, but that's pretty much it. So I don't know how long it's going to be, but we shall see. We shall see. It was also announced nice and late. I do that on purpose. It keeps you on your toes, you know? That sounded... keeps you on your toes, you know? We're getting a bit New Zealandy all of a sudden, isn't it? I'm planning to buy my first Mont Blanc 149. Can you suggest from where I can buy it at reasonable price? Mont Blanc boutique. Otherwise, you're not sure you get a real one, and you're going to pay the full price. But the reality is that if you go to nice bargains where you get Mont Blanc 149 for $5, then you're buying a fake. So the reality is you can do all sorts of things. You can go to all kinds of places. You can go to all kinds of discount sites. But the reality of you ending up with a fake pen is actually very large. So I would not do it. I would go to a Mont Blanc boutique. Now, if you don't want to do that because you want to pay less than retail, there are other options. If you buy on Virtual Pen Show, then you probably get a real pen. If you buy on Fountain Pen Network, you'll probably get a real pen. If you buy on eBay, you may or may not get a real pen. It depends on how well you can judge what you are buying. It also depends on how honest the seller is with the pictures that he or she has put online. So buying a Mont Blanc for a bargain price is not easy. And the reality is, if it sounds too good to be true, then it is. So you will not find one for $100. You will not find one for $200 because those are fakes, right? So this is what I would what I would recommend. And there are more specialized. I mean, pen shows are a little different, difficult right now. There are more specialized options. Penboard.de, Fountain Pen Network. These kinds of. I was hoping there would be more, but like that. Again, Penboard is also a good resource. Penboard.de. And that's pretty much it, I would say. Platinum 3776 Century versus Pilot Custom 74. Whose nib do you prefer? I'm not sure. They are both very nice nibs, but they are different. I find the 3776 nibs, the regular nibs, not the soft nibs, the regular nibs to be really quite rigid. And the Pilot Custom 74 nibs, I think, are a little softer. Now, it's not to say that they are flex nibs because they are not, but they are a little softer. So that could be a consideration. But then again, you have the platinum soft nibs. You know? Right. Might I ask, just quick question. Is the sound quality okay? Because last time, the last Stoic video I did, it was very strange. I may have been a bit too close to the microphone for that one. I don't know exactly what happened, but it was weird, and it was weird. It sounded weird. It sounded very much like this in a nutshell. And I wasn't that close, but it was weird. So anyway, it's quite all right. All right. What else do we have? Some specific painting you love? Yeah, there's a lot of painters I like. I have a particular love, I would say, for medieval painting and for German Romantic painting. And then there are some other things, but what I like about medieval painting is that there is so much storytelling in the paintings, because they often, they were in churches and they were meant to illustrate stories to people who were illiterate. So I find that very interesting. And the German Romantic painting is just, I think it's nice because it's so overwhelming and such an wonderful take on nature, I think, which is something I really like. Yeah, but Escher, of course, being my countryman, I would fully support. Yeah. This is a good question. My ink looks funny in a new piston fill demonstrator pen due to the barrel lubricant. Should I have cleaned this out a bit first? I would say yes. It's always wise to clean a pen well before you ink it up. Now, with a demonstrator, there is always going to be a bit of lubricant, right? Because otherwise the piston won't operate smoothly. So you're always going to see that a bit. It's just that too much of it is a bad thing. So I would definitely clean it out first, but that goes for any pen. I would clean it out first, and then that's it, really. Do you listen to André Rieu, another famous countryman? Yeah. André Rieu is a very interesting musician. So for those of us not familiar with him, he's a Dutch violin player who made an entire Baroque orchestra and with singers and all kinds of stuff. And he tours the world. He's more popular in some countries than other countries. And I think what he has done, what is very nice, is he has popularized classical music. And I think that's great. There is some criticism on him sometimes that he is fairly limited in what he can actually play. Now, I'm not a violin player, so it's a little hard for me to judge. But again, I think it is really quite nice that he has popularized classical music so much. It's just a matter of do you care whether classical music is kind of taken away from the establishment? I know that sounds like it, but that's kind of the argument, I think, where it's really coming from. And I don't care. I think that's a great idea. Like, just make that available to people. Sorry, give me 1 second here. It's quite nippy. I just want to wipe my nose. And obviously, I shall do that off screen. All right, let's continue. Carol went to Portland and bought a new Platinum 3776 Ultra Extra Fine. Shame you bought an Ultra Extra Fine, but I mean, I'm just kidding. Yeah, no, good. The Kampu, yes, yeah, that was it's an unfortunate name, but it is a very attractive pen. Excellent, well done. I'm assuming you really like the fine nibs. It'd be my nightmare, but again, to each his own, right? Yeah, the mic is as plugged in as they get. Oh, no? Okay, well, that's what I can do. Have you tried the Aurora? I also probably should not sit this close to the microphone. I should probably sit up like an adult person. Have you tried the Aurora specialty nibs? I bought a Aurora Optima Rosso with a CM nib. Looks like a Sailor Zoom nib, but in the attempt to save that money, it's stuck in the USA for 6 months. Yeah, I'm awaiting some items from the US too, including my Conway Stewart great exhibition, which I think at the rate things are going, I might see around 2030 or something. Yeah. Have I tried them? Yes. I had to think. Near the end of our stay in the Netherlands, when we were about to move to Canada, then I used, I'm pretty sure, the Aurora Flex Nib. But there was a thing with that. We lent, and I'm going to deliberately be a little vague by request, we borrowed an Aurora Flex Nib from a Dutch pen store. And then the store contacted me and said, don't upload that video because they're changing something about the nib, and that was apparently some sort of prototype. We didn't know that. That was roughly it. So that's the only thing I remember. And I remember that it was a flex nib. I mean, I think it had some issues, but then I'm not really a flex nib user, you know? So what happened to my sexy coil of hair? Oh, there we go. You cultivate this, you know? That's too much. All right, we continue. Have you ever tried adding water to inks to get lighter shades? Does that make the ink last less long on the paper? I've never done it, but I would expect that, yes, you dilute it, so it's going to be lighter, and that potentially may make it last less long. Think of the washable blue inks that often wash out a bit over time well, yeah, that's it, over time. So as time passes, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't be over time. God, I need more caffeine. But yeah, so you could. I've never really done it. How does the King of Pen nib compare to an M1000? Well, one is made by Sailor and one is made by Pelican, right? And they are definitely different. The M1000 nibs are a bit springier, not flex nibs. And the King of Pen nibs are quite a bit stiffer, in my experience. So it depends a bit on what you like. I mean, I'm very hesitant with these things because the number of emails I have received from people stating, I got my M1000, I sprung the nib because I was flexing it and it doesn't work, is quite staggering. But I mean, it was never advertised as a flex nib, but there is this sort of collective awareness online that M1000 nibs are flex nibs, but they're not. They will spring. They will lift off the feet. They were never meant to be flex nibs. They just happen to be a little softer because of the way they're constructed, but that's it. So I'm not trying to sound like, but I'm just saying like that when I say it's a bit softer, that's just it. It's a little softer, whereas the King of Pen nibs are a little bit more rigid, and that's it. Right? That's it. They're both excellent nibs. I like them both a lot. That's it. Have you heard about problems with gold coating coming off from steel nibs in Leonardo Officina pens? This is my all-purpose thinking position. No, I have not heard that. I have heard that in certain circumstances, but now I'm not talking about Leonardo nibs in particular. I'm just talking about nibs, that sometimes gold plating does come off. I have experienced it mainly on very cheap pens. I have not experienced it on Leonardo pens. Sometimes there is a bit of a concern that if you put a gold-plated nib in an ultrasonic cleaner that it can come off, but Brian Anderson, sorry, I want to make sure I target the right Brian here, once told me that that is mainly an issue when the gold plating is already damaged, so when there's already issues with it sticking to the nib. I'm just thinking, in personal experience, I have experienced it, but that was on really cheap Indian pens that were gold-plated where the gold plating came off, or really cheap Chinese pens that were gold-plated where the gold plating came off. But on Leonardo, I haven't experienced it. So then the follow-up question is, have you? Question mark? Because it would be interesting to know. Bach or Jovo, which is better for broad and stubs, smoother, wetter? I found Bach to typically be a little drier than Jovo, and smoothness I don't think matters a whole lot. I don't think there's much of a difference between the two. Do you watch Two Set Violin? I have never watched it. I shall check it out. Have you used any Birmingham pens? No, I have not. He was going to send me a pen at some point that never happened, but it's one guy making those pens, so I understand that. Like it's I wouldn't mind checking them out at some point. It's just that it's never really happened. Oh, interesting. Have you read Oliver Sacks, Anthropologist on Mars? Extremely interesting on art, painters, and what happens to the brain, creativity due to stroke, etc. Interesting. No, I have not, but I'm going to make a note of that because Oliver Sacks was kind of on my list of authors to check out at some point because I know of him, of course. I'll write that down. This is good television, isn't it? Me just writing something and you can't see it. Wouldn't it be neat if I could do this with a 2-camera setup, but I can also write at the same time? But I can't. So unfortunately, a shame. Thank you for the suggestion because I will check it out. Thank you, Carol. Do you have any Wancher pens? No. Aziza does though. But I don't. But she does, but I don't. I'm an artist, continues Carol, who's obsessed with thin lines. So the ultra extra fine composed dream come true. Yeah, no, they're if you like the fine, the ultra extra fine by Platinum and the Saibi Togi by Sailor are unsurpassed. I think anyone makes anything finer and better than those two companies, but it's got to be your cup of tea. We have a friend in the Netherlands, Chris, who is a very gifted. He does role playing, and he's yeah. I'm not into this scene. I'm sorry. Like the game master, the dungeon master, the dude who reads the stories, right? I'm just smiling because I'm trying to describe this in the most sympathetic but inefficient manner. Anyway, he also draws maps for the games that him and his friends play, and he's really good at that. But he likes really fine nibs. So at some point, while in the Netherlands, I just think this is a funny story. I took a Chinese pen, and I took a sharpening stone for knives, which was quite coarse. And I just ground down the sides of that nib to see how fine I could get it. And it ended up as something that was pretty much, I think, ultra extra fine. And it was still pretty good. I tried to polish it so it was not sharp. It was still quite smooth. It was a lot of fun. Then he had a super, super fine pen to draw with, which I think he just enjoyed it. And I think I know I definitely enjoyed the process. I've been trying to start my own business as a nibmeister, and I was wondering if you'd like to send me a pen to try out my grinds. Of course, it would be fully free of charge for you. Well, we could, yeah, but it would probably be good to start your grinding practices first, right? Get the many hours in that are required, and then we shall see. Why did the farmer name his pig Ink? Because he kept running out of the pen. This is a Roger joke. I said. Sorry. What else? Do you have a joke to share? Yeah. I found one recently. It was on Instagram that really made me laugh, but it's not PG, so I'm not going to repeat it here. But at some point, I think Roger will have to feature that one on the gram. But no, it was too adult. It was too adult for this audience. All right. I want to say thank you to you, Stephen. I got into fountain pens because of you. Ran into your channel by chance. Got my first pen, Parker Frontier, back in uni 4 years ago. Glad to see you in real time. Thank you. You're very welcome. And I'm really happy that that is something that's been enjoyable to you and that you have that's become a part of your life, because it's a nice crowd out there. So I think it's fun to be a part of that. Leonardo or Mont Blanc? For me personally, honestly, Leonardo. I like their pens. I like their pens. I have a couple of them, and I like them all, and I use them all. And I should have a Furore on the way. I mean the Furore Grande. I can't wait for that one. I think that's going to be really fun. Consciousness seems to be all the rage in scientific discussion nowadays. What is your take on it? Well, that's a very nice and a question that we can spend the rest of our time here on. From a cognitive neuroscientific perspective, consciousness is very complicated because we don't fully grasp it. But I sometimes think that is a definition problem. And there are people, researchers or philosophers, or both, who believe that, now I'm really simplifying this argument because it's very complicated stuff, but who in a nutshell believe that consciousness may not even exist and that we live without consciousness. Now, clearly that depends a bit on how you define consciousness, because in the simplest form you could say everybody when they're awake are conscious and when they are asleep they're not. But you could also modify that a little bit. What if you're dreaming? Then are you somewhat conscious or are you completely non-conscious? They can go down what I call 50, I always do this in class with students, what I call 50 shades of consciousness. So you have awake, and then you have asleep. And when you are asleep, you see that certain brain areas are less active. And then you have someone under general anesthesia who has more brain areas that are not active. And then someone in a coma, and someone in a persistent vegetative state, with the idea that there is less and less consciousness, which is also reflected in less and less brain areas being active, down to the point where someone in a persistent vegetative state has almost no activity frontally, parietally, etc. Well, parietally, etc. But how can you not have consciousness at all? Well, maybe because it's just a construct. Maybe it's just not a thing. Think for a moment about different kinds of animals, and then go down the chain to simpler and simpler organisms. If you believe that consciousness exists, then I'm assuming that you would say a human being is conscious, right? We are conscious of things during the day when we're awake. Is a dog conscious? I think a lot of people still say, yeah, it's kind of like it does things. And a cat, yeah. What about a guinea pig? Like watch some videos on guinea pigs on YouTube. There isn't much going on, right? You're talking about a brain that's about pea-sized. There isn't a whole lot going on. But maybe, what about a bird? What about a cricket? What about an ant? Is an ant conscious? I mean, they do things. They have chemical signals, just like bees. But are they conscious? Or is it they're just doing things? It's hard. I'm not saying I have the answer, because I don't. But I thought that when I read about that maybe human beings don't even have consciousness either, that you can explain behavior as mental processes coming out of your brain that do not require consciousness. I thought that was interesting. Again, I don't have the answer. I'm just saying it's an interesting thing, I think, to think about. Yeah. Anyway, interesting question. Yeah. I have just started a course on Coursera on social psychology, and it's very interesting. Yeah, it is interesting. Social psychology, I think, in particular, is kind of one of the fun aspects of psychology. A lot of fun research about stereotypes and first impressions and group interactions and such, which is definitely fun. Yeah. I have read them all and worked with Dr. Sachs. That is awesome. More recommendations are always welcome. Thank you. Hello, Katja. Yeah, it was a bit of a surprise. Last minute, isn't it? What else do we have? Dungeon Master. Yeah, that is the term, isn't it? I suddenly had this very vivid image in mind using that term. But yes, okay, got it. Thank you. What would you choose out of the Pelican M800, Visconti Medici, or Homo sapiens Bronze Age? Yeah, those are three very, very different pens. For looks, I would probably go for the Medici. If you want something fancy as to material, I'd go for the Bronze Age. If I wanted what is most likely going to be a more reliable writer, then I would buy the M800. What else? Yeah, looking at some of the German romantic visual artists, found two men contemplating the moon. Compelling, yes. Check out The Monk by the Sea. That's another good one. Anything Caspar David Friedrich or Carl Friedrich Schinkel, Schinkel. It's very interesting. I have a quite expensive pen with an 18-karat gold nib and ebonite feed. The nib is wet, but after half a page it gets dry. This is a problem with the nib, with the feed can be fixed. I don't know what filling system that pen has. If it is a piston filler, then there might be a bit of an air leak. If it is a cartridge converter filler, there might be something wrong with the converter. If it is cartridge converter, I would use it with a cartridge. If that solves the problem, then there's a little bit of an air leak. You may want to replace the converter. If that's not it, then it may be a matter of the feed. That is not something you can solve yourself very easily. That requires someone who really knows what they're doing. I'm also not one of those people. So I give that to people and they solve it for me. Because then you need to look at the alignment of the nib and the feed. You look at the channels in the feed, the air replacement. That's a skill. That's Nibmeister type stuff. So that's what I would look at. I'm just going to scroll here. Has anyone found any affordable traveler company / Midori refills that are fountain pen friendly, please? Midori not always available in the UK, and Tomoe River expensive for everyday use. I personally have not, but if anyone has, then by all means comment. What about the ladies from Chic Sparrow? They make traveler size notebook covers. I actually don't know if they make the paper. I forget now. Sorry, it was a useless comment I just made. Useless. Anyway, maybe check them out. What's all this then? Bits. All right. What else? Know of any pens under $100 that offer a nice calligraphy nib? Well, there's the Lamy Joy, and there's Kaweco. Kaweco has a nice calligraphy set. I don't know if it's quite under $100 because I think that comes with something like 4 nibs, so I wouldn't be surprised if that's maybe a little more. But those are good. And I mean, the really inexpensive options are I don't have one out here. There's a Pilot Parallel, right? Those are superb calligraphy pens in my mind. Very sharp corners. They work very well for that. I'm coming around to your view that good writing pens can occur at lower price levels. My Opus 88, TWSBI VAC 700, Leonardo Momento Zero write as well as my more expensive pens. The penny has dropped. Yeah. At the end of the day, it's the nib that touches the paper. And if it's a good nib, even if it's a steel nib that a lot of people look down on, which I don't find fair at all, you can have a very good writing experience. Theoretically, you could take a $10 Jinhao 159, send it to a nibmeister, have him or her tune that nib, and you should have an excellent writing experience, right? You're saying. So I mean that could happen. Nice. Descartes was wrong. Not cogito ergo sum. There goes the only Latin I know. A fun fact that Descartes actually wrote in French, right? So he actually wrote that in French. Je pense donc je suis. And the Latin came later. Hashtag fun fact. Okay. How do you stay alert and energized throughout the day? Do you ever get caffeine crash? I think what helps is I don't drink coffee. I only drink tea. And I do like some well caffeinated teas. So that helps. Yeah, I think that's mainly it. That helps. Yeah. The article was published by Nova. It was interesting that according to their researchers, there is a 50-50 chance we're living in a simulation of reality. It was bizarre to think of. Yeah. Look, there's a lot of peculiar theories out there. Another favorite one that I really enjoy is the idea that look at the structure of an atom. You know, you have a nucleus and you have neutrons, protons in the center, and you have electrons spinning around it. And then look at the shape of our solar system, and then look at the shape of a galaxy, and then look at all these things. So there is a theory that states that we are just basically molecules in something bigger. And then that would mean that in our molecules and our atoms, there would be another sort of miniature universes and that kind of stuff. Yeah, how true all this is, we'll probably never know, but it's fun to think about sometimes. Sometimes leads to a bit of an intellectual, what do you call that? An existential crisis, sometimes also an intellectual crisis, because you realize you can't figure some things out. That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I overscrolled. I have a parrot, says Sue, and he is definitely conscious. Yeah, exactly. But where do you draw the line, right? What about a spider? Or what about a hummingbird? Or what about a whale? I think it's interesting when you think about these things of where would you draw the line when you say, well, that sparrow is definitely conscious, but that tarantula is not, even though they're the same size. It's interesting, right? Have you ever thought about the rich mental life of a tarantula? And what does it even mean? You know? Another thing that I find fascinating is, how does a baby think? Like if you are like most people, then you think in language and sometimes in images. But I think mainly for most people in language. I mean, when you're at the supermarket, you think, what do I need to buy? I bet 9 out of 10 times you think apples, milk, but you don't visualize a bag of apples and a carton of milk, and that's not how your brain works. But a baby doesn't have formal language because it's not learned yet. Then how does it think? Is it images, feelings, hunger? It can't label it as hunger because hunger is a word, but that feeling, discomfort, it's fascinating. I find that really fascinating. Anyway, moving on. I just bought a Faber-Castell Emotion Croco big heavy pen, and it's fun for recreational writing, but it's taking some getting used to as an everyday writer. Opinions? I think it's a fantastic pen. Fantastic nibs, but it is big and clunky. Not so much long, but very girthy, which matters more according to some. But it's a fun pen to use. For me, mainly it's the nib that makes that pen so special. But yeah, it's a bit short and stubby, stocky. Hi. I have the strong left incline while I'm right-handed. Most of the pens become scratchy on the downstroke for me. Can an oblique nib be the decision? Yeah, I think so. If you rotate your pen as you write, then an oblique nib could definitely help. Yeah. Do you think sorry. Do you think humans domesticating and interacting with animals raise their consciousness? I think we have to be very careful when we read things into animal cognition. So I can give you two examples. There is a type of wasp which lays its eggs in a hole in the ground. Then it flies out and it stings a grasshopper so that it doesn't die, but it's paralyzed. Then it drags the grasshopper to the little hole where it deposited the wasp deposited her eggs. She leaves the grasshopper outside, goes into the hole to check whether everything is okay with the eggs. Then she comes back out, grabs the grasshopper and pulls it into the hole and then flies off. This sounds like pretty intelligent behavior, but they've done experiments where they did this. They let the wasp mother drag the grasshopper to the hole in the ground, and then she went down, and then they moved the grasshopper a bit. Now, what do you think happened? What happened was she came out, looked at the grasshopper, dragged it back to where it should be, went inside to check if the eggs were okay, came back up. But before she came back up, the researchers put the grasshopper somewhere else again. She came back out, put the grasshopper back where it should be, went back to check in if everything was okay with the eggs. And they moved the grasshopper again and again and again and again and again and again. You can play that game until the wasp dies. That's not very intelligent, is it? Right? It's just a pre-programmed, hardwired program. I do this, this, this. And if anything changes a little bit, I can no longer do that thing. And I have to start the program again from the start, do it again from the start, do it again from the start, do it again, and that's it. There's no flexibility. And I think flexibility is one of the aspects of intelligence, being able to flexibly adapt. And that is something that human beings are surprisingly good at, even though we sometimes think we're not. Then there's another story. A friend told me this, he was working on his PhD in biology. He had a friend who had a pet snake, and every night he would let the snake roam free in his apartment. And every night he would go to bed, and the snake would crawl up into the bed, and would stretch out next to the guy. And I couldn't stop laughing. I thought it was hilarious, this image of this snake stretching out. And then my friend said, yeah, my friend thought it was very cute because that snake was so loving towards him. Until one day, they talked to a professor of biology who was specialized in snakes. And he said, do you know what your snake is doing? And the friend said, yeah, it's so sweet that it's so loving that it lies down next to me. And the professor said, no, it's sizing you up. It's seeing if it can digest you. That's what it's really doing. It stretches out to see if it's bigger than you are yet. And once it is, it will eat you. Snakes have no love. They have no compassion. They do not have the brain areas that you do, that have grown on top of the reptile brain that the snake does have. The snake doesn't have this. They have no care, no love, no compassion, no sweetness. And I thought that was very interesting. So I think these are two examples of, we read a lot of things into animal cognition, but I don't think we always should, because I don't think it's always warranted. And that's interesting. Now, if you look at other animals, a wasp is clearly a simple life form. A snake is a bit more complicated, but still doesn't have the brain that a mammal has. If you look at something like a dog, yeah, there is more. Look at how any dog interacts with their owners. I mean, there is something with dogs and cats and these kinds of animals, but they're still not humans. They still have smaller brains, fewer cells, fewer folds and grooves. So it's still not the same. And you do have to be a bit wary of that. I know this was not truly an answer to your question. I think that if there is such a thing as consciousness, then that probably is a function of how your brain works. And the simpler the brain, the simpler the experience of consciousness probably is, at least in my mind. So a cat's consciousness will be different from a dog's, and it will be different from you. Now, a whale, blue whale, your brain weighs about 1,200 grams probably. A blue whale has a brain that weighs 15,000 grams. There we have to be careful to not conflate size of the brain with intelligence, because bigger brains are not meaning you're more intelligent. What I'm trying to say is a bigger brain allows for more complicated computations, and consciousness is probably a pretty complicated computation. Maybe that makes sense. Would you recommend to buy Mont Blanc from a local distributor or from a boutique? I don't think that really matters. If the distributor sells genuine Mont Blancs, it shouldn't be an issue. Do make sure that you get proper warranty, though, because Mont Blanc is peculiar with its warranty. So make sure you check that, I would say. Do you think that social media has pressured people into owning more pens than they would normally have? Yeah. I have, let's see if he responded. I have tried in my way to be free. I have at 12, that is about an hour and 18 minutes from now, I have a meeting with Pierre Miller of the Desiderata Pen Company, and one of the things I want to discuss with him is social media, because this has been on my mind a lot. Someone sent me a trailer to a documentary about the makers of, like the creators of Facebook and such. And I was quite fascinated by that. And I think that social media has done a lot of things, and I think that definitely not all of it is good. So very interested to hear what Pierre thinks about that. But I think the continuous comparisons that we make with other people simply because we see what they have and don't always realize how that is a biased view of the world and of their lives. That's weird. And it leads to all kinds of problems. I had a discussion a while ago with Anna, with whom I do the critical thinking videos, and she said she had issues with the role of the influencer. And I agree. I find that a very peculiar phenomenon, and I would not consider myself an influencer. I've never been paid, I can say, to feature a product, which influencers do. They get paid to show off products. I'm trying to not sound judgmental, but that to me is strange. Because if you, let's say you buy, I'm just using a random brand here, you buy a Midori Traveler's Notebook, which came up earlier, and you want to post a picture of that on Instagram, that's one thing. But then if Midori starts to pay you to post as many pictures as you can of a Midori Traveler's Notebook, yeah, I don't know. I just find that strange. Again, I'm not trying to criticize influencers, but I don't really understand. And you give a strange image of your life. Like, oh, I'm in this fancy restaurant, look at the food, but that's paid for because you're an influencer. I don't know, it's just weird. And I think with pens is the same thing. And I realize I also post pen pictures. I'm not saying I'm innocent. But like you see these people with massive collections, and I that didn't used to be a thing. And I think that now, I think fear of missing out really is a thing. And that people buy stuff because they're afraid that they miss out on the latest pen or the ink or the paper or the whatever is hot at that time. I believe that. And I find that a strange development, just very strange. You know, these are the ramblings of an old man. We shall continue. Osprey, Scholar, or Milano for everyday use. I like the Milano. I think it's a nice pen. Leah says there are Etsy stores, Taroko Paper Company, I think. That was in response to the traveler recommendation. So thank you for that. Thanks. What else do we have? Thanks for the recommendations. This is about the calligraphy pens. I have the parallel, but the amount of ink it puts out is a bit of a problem sometimes. Yeah, look into these other ones. The Lamy Joy also has nibs that are much finer, right? They're not going to be like the Pilot Parallels, which are like, you know, not like that. Pilot Custom A23 or Pelican M800. Yeah, well, both very good pens, right? So I don't know. That's a matter of preference, I would say. Like they're both good pens. M800 is a bit girthier. The A23, yeah, no. I think that I wouldn't be able to say one is better than the other. If you've answered this, please ignore. How would one find a Nibmeister? I have an entire video on it called On Nibmeisters, and that should give you some ways to some names and places to start looking. How to remove nib and section from Schaefer Lady fountain pen? I have no idea. Never used one. Sorry. What are your thoughts on Jordan Peterson? I think Jordan Peterson is a person who has interesting ideas, but who is also incredibly abrasive. And I don't think that being abrasive is the best way to get your ideas across. And I'm sure that an argument could be raised of, oh yeah, but you just create friction and that makes people think. Sure, but you can also make people think in a very kind and sweet manner. Or maybe sweet is not the right word here, but in a kind and calm manner, as opposed to actively rubbing people the wrong way to get a reaction out of them. I don't think that's a great way to motivate people or to teach people or to make people think. That's my opinion, right? But I think he goes quite far and is quite extremist in many ways in his views, which is entirely his right, but then think about how you vent those opinions and what that means. That's what I would say. Still trying to sell my Schaefer cigars on eBay. I still have the box and include the cigars ballpoint and rollerball section and refill for $60. Am I asking too much? Yeah, sometimes it's just a matter of it has to be the right person who comes along. You should try Virtual Pen Show because it's a more specialized. I'm not saying that to make a commercial for Virtual Pen Show, but that's a more specialized audience. So I say you have a better chance at those kinds of things. eBay is very hit or miss. A friend in Calgary who tried to sell some pens on eBay for a long time, and they were good pens and his price was fair, but it just didn't happen. Sometimes it's like that. You just need to have the right person come by at the right time. Platinum 3776 or Sailor Pro Gear. Yeah, this is another matter. These are personal preferences, right? Like, I mean, we can compare every single pen to every other single pen. Try them out and then see what you think, because it's very hard to. I mean, they're both good pens, so I don't know how I would objectively classify as one being better than the other. Is a baby conscious? Oh, that's the question. Is anyone conscious? Right? We haven't established that yet. I think a baby is aware within the limitations of the baby brain. I don't know. Again, I'm not sure about the whole consciousness. I just read it was a short book about it, but it was interesting, and it definitely gave me some thoughts about. There's more to think about in that regard. What do you think about language is a lossy compression algorithm applied to thoughts? Yeah, that's possible, but how do you express thoughts without language? It could be in images, but then that's also a type of symbolism. So it's complicated. We don't really know yet, I think. Yeah, exactly. Carol, this is a good point. A plant that leans into the way the sun moves throughout the day, or a flower opening in morning, closing petals every evening. Is that consciousness? Yeah, is it? I mean, a plant doesn't really have a central nervous system. So if it depends on that, having that to be conscious, then no. But it is something. Or is that, again, hardwired behavior? Right? Right. Right. I've known some tarantulas, says Casey, and they're definitely conscious. Yeah. See? Confusion galore. Now we don't know anymore. This is a very poetic statement. Knowing more than one language is having the ability to exist in more than one reality. The words we use to describe the world shape it in our consciousness. Yeah, it's a nice way to look at it, I think. It could be. Consciousness could be a set of complex biochemical pathways which evolved over time. More time is more pathways. More pathways is greater consciousness. Yeah, well, that's very much how I feel about these things. Yes. And as we understand the whole makeup of the brain better and better, the makeup of our genes better and better, I think we will start to understand these more complicated processes better and better. We're not quite there yet, but I think we will get there. Can you recommend some book material to carry forward on the concept of the hierarchy of thought and language that you brought up? No, I have to think about it. The specific consciousness thing I read, that's a nice series from Oxford University. Is it Oxford or is it Cambridge? Oh, no, I'm confused. I think it's Oxford. They have a series of books called Very Short Introductions, and the Very Short Introduction to Consciousness is what I read. And it was interesting. The very little bit I find in their quality. It's not that anything is bad, but they are Some are a bit more legible than others, but the consciousness was very good. Very short introduction to consciousness. What do you think of the Desiderata Banff? I'm not sure yet, but I have one on the way, so stay tuned. In terms of the durability and quality of the resin material, which is better, the Sailor 1911, Standard Platinum 376? I really think there is absolutely no difference whatsoever in quality of the resin material between the two. What's the worst accident you've ever had, and did you learn anything from it? I can regale you with a short story. If we're talking about physical accidents, I haven't been in many, which is fortunate. But I can tell you this short story because I thought it was interesting. Once upon a time, when I was much younger, I grew up in a small village in the south of my country. And for some reason, we didn't go outside to play. I want to say it was winter, but that could be a fabrication. I was probably 4 or 5, so this is a long time ago. And was a small village school with 50 kids in the entire school. And there was this little auditorium, which in my mind was quite big, but I was very little. So in reality, it was probably really not that big. And there was a workbench with a vise on it. I can picture this wooden workbench. It looked like someone actually made that themselves. And that vise had a cast iron, I can picture this thing, black handle with a hole in it, which I think you're supposed to like stick something like a dowel through and then turn it to operate that vise. And one kid, not out of particular malice, but one kid pushed me, and we were wearing socks, and I fell, and that metal piece that hit me right there, I still have the scar right there. And unfortunately, the skin of the head is very vasculated, so there was much blood. It wasn't terrible, but there was bleeding. And one of the teachers took me to the village doctor, because there was a village doctor. And the village doctor saw me come in with, I don't know what, like a towel or something that and he said, "Oh, now it's really good when a doctor responds that way to the sight of blood, I have found. That's an excellent sign." So this doctor said, "I'm not going to put sutures in. I'll just glue it." And the teacher said, "Okay." Then she brought me to my mother, who was down the street. She freaked out a bit. I think I stayed home for lunch, and I think I went back to school. Later that night, I want to say my dad was out for work for a conference or something. I'm watching television. Little SBREBROWN. I'm really building this up, aren't I? Storytelling. I'm watching television, and I feel this wetness on my face. I think, what is this? I wipe it. I look at my hand, and there's blood. So the blood is now seeping out of this wound. So my mother packs me up. drives to a doctor. Now, in the Netherlands, things are a little different than North America, I found. We don't have walk-in clinics. So for us, typically, we have the doctor, you're registered with that doctor, and then you call that doctor in the evenings or on the weekends, and then you get a little answering machine that says, the doctor of duty is Dr. etc. and they're at this address. And then you know. So she put me in a car. We drive to that doctor. That was a younger guy. And he sits me down in a chair and he looks at the wound. And he says that will require a suture. It's too big a gash. But here's the problem. Some quack glued it. And now I have to pull out the glue. Because I can't suture it with the glue in there. I'll try to make this not too explicit. But I remember the pain. And then I also remember him putting one of these paper things over my face so I couldn't see. It was just a little hole there. And he sutured it. I don't think it was 1, maybe 2. It can't have been more than that because it wasn't that big. And it's not a big scar now, but you can see it here, right? You can sort of see that. That's a little thing there. What did I learn from this? A few things. Poor Nicky, who pushed me, I fell. I got up, and I slugged him in the face. That is one of the very, very few times in my life that I have punched someone. That was not wise. Second thing is, if your doctor is afraid of blood, get another doctor. And I think the third lesson is I'm paraphrasing Hannibal Lecter, but you have to cherish your scars because they show you that the past was real. And I carry that day with me every day, right? And you, again, I know you barely see it, but now you know. And there are other scars. And they just show you that the past was real. Was a bit anticlimactic, wasn't it? Anyway, you look so stoic this morning. That's because it's, it's snowing again in October. That's why. The reason, says Alain, to choose Visconti Medici is that it matches SBREBROWN perfectly. That is true. Yeah. What else? What else do we have? Snake story is apocryphal. Yes, I've heard the snake is just getting warm. Well, I don't know. This is how the story was told to me. I have always believed it. Yeah. You mentioned something earlier about cartridges versus converters and air leaks. I have a Parker IM that starts hard and skips when using a converter, but rides beautifully when a cartridge is used. Yeah, that's probably it. Then that air seal isn't perfect, and that's the kind of thing that you get. Yeah. Can one be a minimalist and a pen lover? Yeah, I don't see why not. You can have a few pens. I don't see why that would be a problem. If you use them all, I don't see what the issue is. I find the issue to be more problematic when people have thousands of pens or hundreds of pens and they use the same 3 every time. Then I wonder if what you're doing makes sense. But that's just me, of course. I'm taking a psychology course. Guess what? The professor is constantly talking about fountain pens. That is cool. What else? Yeah, I realize this. Leah says, have you not been given products to show off? Not to show off, right? To review. And in my mind, that's different. It's, in my mind, different to be sent a product or lent a product that you then review and say, this is a review, versus you posing with all sorts of pictures and, sorry, with all sorts of products and all kinds of like, oh, this is me at the pool with my 2 pens. Oh, this is my, that. I have never done that. What else? FOMO is huge in the arts and craft community. It's hard to not get sucked into buying and trying the latest things, even when the products are essentially the same. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And that's it's a thing. I mean, you see it in the pen world too. Like every new pen that comes out, I have stopped caring about that a long time ago. I'm not saying that to sound bitter or negative or anything, but it's more so the matter of no, I have what I want. I don't need another Lamy Safari simply because it's a new color. Now, I say again, there's nothing wrong with you if you do want that, and if you, for example, collect Safaris, that makes sense. If it's a color that comes out you love, it's fine, right? That's not what I'm saying. But to buy simply because it is new and shiny, that I think is a problem. And I think that many people in any hobby start out doing that, and they buy this and they buy that and they buy so that is something that I would avoid. But again, that's just me, right? That's just me. How good do you consider yourself in cooking Indian food? You follow a lot of YouTubers for recipes. I do check out recipes on YouTube. I haven't cooked a whole lot of Indian food. I do like to make butter chicken. I have made naan. I have finally taken the plunge and have made my own naan, which was easy and delicious. But then, if you don't like naan, there's just something wrong with you. Like, let's be fair. If you don't like fresh hot naan, there's something wrong with you. You heard it here first. And what else? Curry. I like curries, but there are so many different types of curries and different ways to make it. I just watched a video on how to make your own red curry paste, sort of more of a Thai curry. I want to try that. It was really funny because the guy cut up two habanero peppers, and the guy behind the camera said, "Are you going to leave the seeds in?" He said, "Yeah, leave the seeds in." And then he cooked it, and it was incredibly spicy. I was like, "Oh, this is really spicy." And I was like, nothing makes sense anymore. Anyway. Yes. Should I get a big ballpoint or an Amiki Emperor? Yeah, you should get 5 Emperors, in fact. Nice. That's exactly what I was talking about. Hello from Athens, Greek. Yasu Tikanis. I missed out on your initial release of your ink. Will there be other releases of it? I thought, well, there have been many releases. I thought that there was still some ink at Akamon, but I think because of the coronavirus, they had some issues with getting bottles. I don't think they were out of ink. I think they were out of bottles. So there will be more. Part of it, yeah, that's another good point. Part of it is also manufacturers that create fake demand by declaring a pen limited and only shipping a certain number of a pen. Yeah, yeah. I know, and I'm not sure how I feel about that either. Because some pens are also numbered, but then it turns out that there are 5,000 of them anyway. So then what's no, that's another thing that I find complicated. Yeah. Have you ever tried the Steel Form fountain pens, the German brand, which has had a Kickstarter campaign? No, I have not. Steven Pinker, The Language Instinct is a good book for that person asking on language conscious. Yes, I was thinking of maybe something from Steven Pinker. Yeah, that sounds like a good one. Yes, The Language Instinct. Steven Pinker is an interesting author. Yeah, so that would be recommended. Reactivity to external stimuli and consciousness are not the same thing. Consciousness and self-awareness operate at different levels. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. What do you think has caused the increase in political polarization in society? Is it primarily social media? How worse will the pandemic make things? I think it is. And I think that one thing that has contributed to this is that people are unable to critically process what they read. So a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people read things on Facebook and then believe it is true. Right? Think of all the things that get sent around, emailed around, messaged around, WhatsApped around, etc. Where in reality, it's blatant nonsense, right? And I think that kind of stuff has definitely contributed to people becoming more polarized because they believe whatever they read, and it's a massive problem. They also see certain things. They cannot assess things critically. I think that all contributes to these kinds of problems. Yeah, 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 yeah. Are you still friends with Nicky, who you punched post-head injury? I haven't seen him in years, but at some point I moved, and there was no hard feelings either because it was never. It was just kids do that. They shove each other around. No, that was interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's definitely some scars obtained over the years. Yeah. What's your time there? It is now 11:10 a.m. Yes, 10 past 11 a.m. Miss je Nederland? In other words, do you miss the Netherlands? There are things I miss. Yeah. And there are other things I don't miss. I have come recently to look. We're getting a little philosophical here. I have come recently to look at life as a sequence of eras. And that's how I process things now. I'm going to write that down because I need to discuss it with Pierre too. But at some point, I saw a quick interview with one of my favorite Flemish chefs, Johan Sagan. It was a beautiful video, but they removed it from YouTube, which is a shame. It was a tie into a book in which they'd interviewed several chefs, and he had a saying that really stuck with me. He said, "Every in Dutch, every time, but in English, I think it would be a more appropriate translation would be every era has its evolutions and revolutions, and that's what makes it so wonderful." And I think that if you look at your life as an interconnected set of eras, then I think you have a better grasp on what's going on in your life. So I've had several eras. Was born in one province of my country, moved there from there when I was very young to the province next door, grew up there until I was 11. Very wonderful province. Went to primary school there. For us, that's 8 years. I did my first 7, well, let's say like about 6.5 years there. And that was one era. Then we moved more to the north. I finished primary school there. I did my high school there. I did my university years, bachelor's and master's there. That is an era. But within that, there are different eras. There is your high school era. There is a university era. Even within university, you could separate bachelor's versus master's eras. And I moved to another province to do my PhD, lived there. Aziza moved over, came there. We lived there. Or moved to Toronto, etc. So I can keep going. Right now, I'm in my Red Deer era. And by the way things look, I think I will be here for a while. But there are always things that you miss from earlier eras. And there are also things that you don't miss. And this is where Johan Segers comes in. Because every era has its evolutions and revolutions. And that's what makes it so beautiful. You go through certain developments. You learn certain things. Some things are pleasant, some things are unpleasant. The glue incident was an unpleasant incident, but there were also many pleasant incidents. And it's the pleasant stuff you tend to miss. But then over time, it gets replaced with other pleasant stuff, other pleasant things, which are different, quantitatively, qualitatively different for each era. And that's kind of it. I'll leave it at that because I don't want to overfeed you strange philosophy, but that to me has made it easier to process more unpleasant things from certain eras. They were the revolutions, but they were required so that the evolutions could take place. Yeah. What would you buy if you only had enough for one of them? Esterbrook Camden or Diplomat Aero? I haven't tried the Camden yet. I will say I really like the Diplomat Aero. But that's a somewhat unfair comparison for me to make because I haven't used the Camden. Hello, can I have a shout out? Yes, you can have a shout out. Was it Leilachu? Hello. I don't know if I pronounced it correctly. An influencer is a salesperson on the internet. Yeah, and I have no illusions that you could also say, yeah, so is a reviewer. You review products, and I mean, yeah. But I think the difference is that when I review a product, if I give a certain product a really positive review, like take something like Logby. I reviewed the Logby products. I've got another Logby review coming up. I mean, theoretically, because it hasn't been shot yet, but somebody will be that's their black products, the new black products. I was very enthusiastic about the Logby products. And I remember that one person got very upset because he thought it was a commercial. Well, the reality is I was just very enthusiastic about those products, and I was not paid for that review. But you have to look at it from my perspective. If Logby sells 500 million billion units after I have done a review, I don't see a penny of that, right? If, on the other hand, they sell one, I don't see a penny of that either. So I try to be as objective as I can in my reviews. But that's it. Whereas in my mind, an influencer, where this is, I'm not saying Logby does this, but because I use Logby, I'll use it again. If Chris of Logby now comes up to me and says, here's $1,000 a month, post 3 pictures a week of Logby products in different contexts, which again, this is not something Chris has done, but I'm just using it as an example. That becomes different in my mind, because then you are, that is an advertisement. Then you're advertising certain products. And 5 years ago or 10 years ago, that was not a thing. There was no influencer, just like there were no haters because there was no social media to do that on. 10 years. Time flies, Brown. 20 years ago, that was not a thing. But now it is, right? Now it is. You should, if you haven't, you should watch the movie Chef with Jon Favreau. First of all, I love Jon Favreau. But I thought that was a fantastic movie, not only because it features cooking, which I like, but that shows the power of social media. It shows what can happen when you do the wrong thing. It shows the power that a blogger can have and how they can make and break people. And that's why, well, we've had this discussion before, so I don't want to go into all those arguments again. That's something I find difficult about reviewing. There are consequences to your actions. This might not be the type of thing you usually talk about on this channel, but is the 2020 presidential election in the USA a topic you and your peers talk and think about a lot? Yes, it is. I'm going to refrain from commenting too much on the contents, but wow, is what I'll say. What's the deal with the amount of feedback from the Lamy 2000? I expect more from a pen that's $150. Yeah, to each his own, right? Some people like that feedback. So it also is a matter of what you expect and what your personal preferences are, I think. I'm considering buying the Visconti Il Magnifico Lapis Lazuli. Do you see this as a pen that will retain most of its value over the next 5 years? If you leave it uninked in a vault, it absolutely will. Your review on the Japan Blue fountain pen. I reviewed it from Wancher. Yeah. I thought it was interesting. Bit small, I found, but interesting. What's your favorite Carl Sagan book? There are many really good ones, but I found The Demon Haunted World, maybe because it was my first, but I found that one particularly strong. And then I haven't read a bad one. Shadows of Forgotten Ancestors was also very good. But the Demon Haunted World was a very good book, I thought. Is SBREBROWN still unavailable in the US? My beard is the same as yours with the reddish bit. I need to see this ink as the color of my beard. Yeah, I know. That's it. I think it is still unavailable because, as I said, I think they had issues with the bottle. So, which is your favorite pen and ink at the moment? Well, I will say I'm rather enjoying my Lambrou Pens LB6 with Corn Poppy Red from Montblanc. That is a nice combination. Would like to know if a Schaefer Segaris medium nib or fine nib is better. That depends on your handwriting. The smaller it is, the finer the nib you need. So I don't think one's better than the other. They just are designed for different forms of handwriting, right? Let's see what else we got. I've seen vids where they talk about the social media echo chamber contributing to the decisiveness, algorithms trying to suggest stuff to keep you on platform. There's a problem filling someone's pocket. Yeah, that's the thing, right? It's very disturbing. If I look at something on Amazon, then the next day on Instagram I get ads for that product on Amazon. So it's like, what? I was looking at that yesterday. So that I do find that peculiar. Yeah. Do you have a favorite permanent black ink? No, I don't really use a lot of permanent inks. Sailor Kiwaguro is my current go-to. Yeah, that sounds pretty good. Do you see a difference between corporate news, propaganda, and falsehoods on social media? I think it boils down again to people being unable to critically analyze what they read, hear, or see. If people could do that, then there wouldn't be a very big issue. But now there is a big issue because people cannot do that and believe everything they hear, are unable or unwilling, sometimes both, to seek out multiple sources on the same thing to form an opinion, I think. Thank you for your Stoicism series. I found that really interesting. Good, thank you. Do you have a diachronic sense of self, or are you an episodic? I have never asked myself that question. Is it going to require thought? Does one's past define them as a person, or their strive for a better future? I think both. I think your past forms you to a large degree, but I also think you can change yourself and change the way you think, and as a result become a different person. And by doing that, you can strive for a better future. What else do we have? Should I buy an Oxford fountain pen? I don't think I've ever used them, so I can't recommend. I just don't know. Your favorite mechanical pencil? I hardly ever use mechanical pencils, so I don't know. Do you know if anyone makes a Steel Army 2000 replacement nib? I don't think so. I don't think so. Not that I'm aware of. Maybe there is someone, but yeah. What else? Have you ever wanted a pet? You seem like you would be a good dog owner. Yeah, what holds me back is to have a. Like right now, things are different, but going out and having a pet alone and such is just, I don't know, a little difficult. What do you prefer, sheen or shading? I prefer shading. I do not care at all for sheen. I know that. Oh, when I click, I open it. Yeah, no, I've never been one for sheen, really. What else? Just an FYI, oil-coated 1200 grit emery paper works well for smoothing scratchy nibs. The oil coating significantly reduces the abrasiveness of the emery paper. Good. That is good to know. I'm looking to buy a new pen. It's a steel nib for less than 100 to write on terrible paper. Any Chinese pen. Because they typically have finer nibs. I think anything would be fine. I don't think it needs to be anything super fancy in that case. Shall I show you something? It's a Leonardo Cuspide. Probably Cuspide. This was lent to me by Joost Appelboom, and it is very pretty. It has the flexi nib, and it also has, so it has those cutouts on the side, and it also has an ebonite feed, and it is a piston filler, and it is a nice size, and I really like that chatoins, because that is quite intense on two sides, and the cap as well. And I was able, I forgot how I did it, I was able to line up those facets, because otherwise they don't right now. There was a way to do it, and I'll figure it out, but anyway, just so you know. Does it actually flex? It does, in a way, actually flex. Let me get some paper out. It does flex. Nice. Yeah. Being, that's a fun remark. Yeah. So I shall now put this next to a pumpkin spice latte with soy milk and squeezed green beans, because I'm an influencer. Hashtag flat lay. more or less. Yeah. How do you keep your pens on your desk, on the table, or do you have a pen holder of sorts? I right now just keep them on the desk, but there is a, I do have sort of a pen holder. Yeah, that's kind of it. That's kind of it. I don't really have any fancy mechanisms. Are you going to swap out your personal Furore with the Grande version? Well, I think Salvatore wanted me to keep those, so I may keep both. Also, this was a loaner from Yoast. Try getting it back. Oh, interesting. The Lamy 69 nib was the same as the Lamy 2000, but steel. As far as I was told by Lamy in Heidelberg, they still do have Lamy 69 nibs in stock. You have to contact the Lamy headquarters. That's very interesting. Any cheap pen with a large diameter? Yeah, you have a whole bunch. Check out Fountain Pen Revolution. There's all those really big Indian pens that have really large diameters. Do you use writing instruments other than fountain pens? If so, what are some of your favorites or go-tos? Not a lot. I've been using this because Laban sent it to me. It's the Solar, and it's a rollerball, which I kind of like because it's not too big, but it's a comfortable rollerball. But I really don't use much beyond that, really. What is your experience with the Conklin Omniflex nibs? I have used them. I've reviewed them, I think. Is a steel nib on the Diplomat Arrow the best steel nib? Well, I think that really depends on how you define the best. It is a steel nib, and it's a good nib. How much is that pen? You're talking about this, right? These are 700 euros. And I think that's one of the big issues to overcome, because all the other Leonardos are not all. Many of the Leonardos are much less expensive. So people then start to kind of expect that. And it's not celluloid. It's just a gold nib and a piston filler, but it is an acrylic. So that's going to be interesting. Intro music translation. There is no translation. These are sounds. SBREBROWN.com/frequently-asked-questions for full explanation of the intro music. All right. I'm going to say goodbye because I have Pierre in half an hour and I do need to make some tea, etc. I thank you all for being here. This was a lot of fun. I will try to announce it a bit more timely next time. If you think to yourself, I wonder if there is something I can do to support SBREBROWN, patreon.com/SBREBROWN allows you to support me. You don't have to, but you can. And I always appreciate it. I appreciate everyone anyway, but I appreciate it. So, thank you so much. Thank you. This was fun. That was some interesting, intense discussions. I'll see you next time. Bye!